public and private drinking places. I've been long interested in the way in which different cultures have spaces where they entertain other people or go and have convivial, friendly drinks. And of course, each civilization and culture specializes in different ones. So just to talk about three manifestations of these. One is the one right across East Asia, and that is the tea house. I have a tea house in my garden, and I entertain people to little tea ceremonies, and I've been to many, many tea ceremonies throughout Japan and China. And in different parts, it's a different ceremony, and the tea is different, and the rituals are different, and they're very elaborate. Japanese tea ceremonies in particular are extraordinary, and what's a feature of all these kinds of tea ceremonies there is that the slow brewing and preparation of the tea by a tea master or someone else means that you can have lots of miniature rituals, and it breeds a kind of quiet, contemplative, special zone or space in the tea house, and it's difficult to tell what exactly it is. It seems more than just drinking tea. There is, because it's usually Buddhist or related to Buddhism, there is no God, and yet it has a special feeling of otherness, that there's something more than just the tea and the drinking of the tea. It's clearly strongly about social relationships. You only drink tea with people you want to drink tea with, and it both expresses your deep bond to them and also causes new friendships. So to drink tea with people is something special in these countries, and also a place where in normal public tea houses, which were scattered all over cities and towns in Japan and China, strangers would meet and drink tea together. And so tea drinking and the tea house are in many ways one of the cores, the absolute center of Japanese and Chinese culture, and had huge effects. The tea architecture and aesthetics had huge effects on their art systems, obviously on their crafts, on ceramics, on the making of wonderful tea bowls. And so it seeped out, as it were, right through their cultures. So, and it's a non-alcoholic drink, so it's a peaceful, calm drink. So that's one kind of tea and public drinking space. The second one is the coffee house. I don't particularly relish coffee. I like it well enough. So I have never been a frequenter of coffee houses. But the two kinds of coffee house which stand out in my mind. One is the one you'll see in many parts of southern Europe, which is just a little sort of bar, very strong coffee, and traditionally, though I'm sure it's changed, this was a haunt for old friends and old male friends. You wouldn't see women in most of these coffee houses, though I'm sure there are exceptions. And so it's a male drinking area where you would maybe play games and you would sip this very strong, abrasive coffee. So the coffee belt right across Latin cultures of the Mediterranean and no doubt South America is obviously very important. The two other coffee houses that have impinged on me, one is that when I was in my teens, the great sort of social revolution in England, the era of the beginning of rock music and Elvis Presley and so on, was accompanied by a new kind of entertainment venue, the coffee house. So I strongly remember the first coffee houses coming into the Lake District town near where I lived, the Amber Coffee bar, run by a friend of mine, where you had a jukebox and you had music playing, and it was an extraordinarily liberated area. You let your hair grow longer, you met up with girls, you hung out. So the social scene behind the youth and other rebellion of the later 1950s in England, and no doubt, and obviously it came from America, was the coffee house. So it was an engine of revolution. And the third kind of coffee house, which I have been interested in, is the one which grew up when coffee first came into England, and this was the coffee houses in London and big cities, particularly London. For example, Lloyd's Coffee House, where people met and talked about economic and financial matters and decided to join together, and they made an insurance company, Lloyd's Insurance, or others where people who were from scientific backgrounds, the future Royal Society or members of the Royal Society, would come together and discuss the latest breakthroughs in science. So the conversations in the coffee houses of London in the later 17th and 18th century had a huge effect in many spheres, in arts, discovery, science, music, and so on. And even the gardens in which Handel and other musicians' music was played were often places where coffee was served. So the coffee cantata, which I loved of Bach's, is a celebration of coffee. The third kind of drink, which is characteristic of a civilization, is the place where you drink beer, and this is the English pub. If there's something quintessentially English, it is the pub or public house. It's called a public house because anyone in theory can go in there, although obviously it's not public. It's a sort of front room, often very small, in people's houses, and the local woman would brew up some beer and people would come in. In my village in the Fens, there were masses of little public houses, pubs, scattered through this through the Fens, with just local neighbours coming in usually. And likewise in northern Yorkshire towns I've been in, there were almost as many pubs as there were houses. But and when I came to this village, which was only 1,000 or so people, there were 2 or 3 pubs. And the special thing about a pub is that it breeds a kind of friendship and equality. You go in, there are people sitting round or standing at the bar, and you buy your pint, and you can turn to someone and say, "Oh, hi, who are you?" and get into quite a friendly conversation. They are also very important for local power and government, because it's where people meet together to iron out differences and make decisions about building a cricket ground or whatever it is. They play darts. So it's a social centre and terribly important in the growth of English democracy and self-government. So the pub, and I suddenly feel relaxed if I go into certain pubs, and they can even have enormous effects on a civilization. The English Reformation, it's said, started in a pub, the White Hart, built into the walls of King's College, Cambridge, which was known as Little Germany, and into that pub came the writings of Luther and other German reformers, and were discussed, then taken and preached in the local church, and out of that grew the English Reformation. So they can be a centre of revolutionary ideas, but above all, they are both an expression and a creator of friendship, conversation, equality. So in function, they are not dissimilar to coffee bars or tea houses, but each has, as it were, a distinctive flavour, and without them, human life would be much less rich.